All right, once a month, we like to bring on Megan Basham to talk about the culture. She really is doing terrific work at the Daily Wire, covering the culture. She's been doing it for like 15 years. She's written for the Wall Street Journal, National Review, Focus on the Family, the Washington Times. I am following her because I just get a lot out of what she's doing. And if you don't have, I think you need a reader's pass. I can never keep track of all the different levels we have here now, but the reader's pass, I think you need to read her stuff. It is well worth it. Megan, it's good to see you again. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. And congrats on the book launch.
Thank you very much. I'm so shocked. It got on the USA Today list. It's the first time a book about Jesus and the English Romantic poets has been on the USA Today list or any other list anywhere. So.
I love this topic.
You have got a story today that is, well, first of all, it's so pertinent and relevant to what's going on about how these businesses have gone woke and why they've gone woke and the methods by which they've been turned woke, which is really interesting. I'm going to read just a little bit of it just to give people an idea. You write, perhaps no political shift in recent years has had as significant an impact on our culture as major corporations wading into political activism. PayPal, Nike, and General Electric opposed a North Carolina law that required use of government bathrooms to correspond with biological sex, and they won that fight. Buoyed by that success, companies like Coca-Cola and Delta waded into public debates. And of course, we've seen Disney fighting with DeSantis down in Florida about this law to maintain parental rights. How did we get here? I mean, we on the right used to love big business, and we used to be kind of the party of big business, and now we're fighting them tooth and nail for our culture. How did this happen?
You know, and that was kind of fascinating to me because I am not a finance girl. I am not a math girl. So this was all really new information to me. And I came into this story kind of through the side door because I cover a lot of Disney and I was interested in what was happening with Disney. And I started talking to the financial whizzes. And they were telling me, you guys have this story all wrong. This is not about the activists within the company. This is about shareholders from without, and particularly some very big shareholders, the asset managers, BlackRock, Street, and Vanguard. And they said they sort of hold this vice grip on America's Fortune 500. And this was all, it was kind of falling down a rabbit hole to discover all this information. And they said, they own on average 20% of every Fortune 500 company in America.
Holy moly.
And and they're extremely woke. And they are using their leverage, and we'll get to that in a minute, because it's not actually their leverage, it's your leverage that they're using. But they manage these pension funds, they manage IRAs, they manage 401ks. And what they do is they come into these companies and they use their power to say, we want you to enact certain what they call ESG, environmental, social, and governance policies that are woke. And if you don't do this, then we will do things like replace board members, or we won't take your company public. That's Goldman Sachs, who is also very woke. So they enact these policies, and they're doing it using the leverage of your money. So that was really just kind of the insane story to me that I went, how did I not know this?
So, it is kind of amazing. Just so we're clear about this, because I'm not a business guy either. I have a pension fund. If my pension fund is managed by one of these three companies, those are essentially shares in their control. I mean, those are shares where they can say, if you want us to invest these pension funds in your company, you have to do what we say. Is that basically it?
Well, that, and even more than that, what they do is they go ahead and invest, and then they say, now as your largest shareholder, this is what we want you to do.
I see.
And yes, and so they argue it's something called stakeholder versus shareholder capitalism. So in the past, the shareholders are the boss, right? You have to have a good return on investment. Well, now they approach it through something they called stakeholder capitalism, which means we're not just beholden to the people who hold shares in our company. We're beholden to anybody who might claim to have some social impact from our business. And that could be anybody. You could say, well, okay, Black Lives Matter. We're very concerned about what's happening in the community where we have a company. Therefore, Black Lives Matter is a stakeholder in our company. So we need to do things to respond to their concerns.
Did these guys?
It's a racket.
It is a racket. I mean, but I used to know guys from Goldman Sachs, and they were pure money guys. They couldn't have cared less. Is this a takeover of these asset managers? I mean, or did it just kind of occur to them that this is something they wanted to do at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a certain sense that it is an ideological takeover. And part of what was interesting to me, because I went, well, don't you guys just want to make money? And they said, no, at a certain point, you also want the social cachet of saying, that we are environmental activists. And there's the group think, it doesn't matter how much money you have or how successful you are. The group think gets to almost everyone, right? Except maybe like a guy like Elon Musk, who has now been on the cusp of saying, I am very anti this ESG approach. In fact, he's out sort of sounding the alarm, saying this is the devil incarnate, this movement.
Yeah. So now you have, for instance, Disney. Their stock is plummeting because of this fight they're having with DeSantis. I mean, they looked awfully bad after those Chris Rufo tapes. I was appalled. I mean, I had whatever affection or loyalty or nostalgia I had for Disney was absolutely destroyed watching these kind of people plot against the minds of children. Do the people who are investing, like the ordinary people whose money is going into these pensions, if they start to see the stock fall, aren't they going to come back to the asset managers and say, you've invested my money in something that's collapsing?
Well, that was kind of an interesting question that I put to some of these financial guys. And they said, the problem is we haven't been doing that. The right has been entirely absent on this front, and the left has made huge gains. And so suddenly, just now, we're starting to wake up to that. So you're starting to see now, you might say conservative investment groups starting to advise people that, look, even if you own shares, you can show up and start speaking at these shareholders meetings. And I had a finance advisor who was also a former columnist at Forbes who told me, look, if just 10, 15 people had showed up at that original Disney shareholder meeting where Bob Chapek shifted gears, it might have changed the outcome of this story. It might have changed what they did. And, what was really interesting is one of the things he pointed out to me was that when Target went through this bathroom stuff in 2016, he said, a friend of mine is friends with that guy, the CEO of Target, and he's actually an evangelical Christian. And, this is a bit of hearsay, but he said, my friend told me that he said, no one was there to back me up. Nobody came to the shareholder meetings. Nobody provided me any cover. And he didn't really want to do the woke will of, these activist outside shareholders. He didn't want to bow to the pressure, but he said he had no cover. And I will say, I have heard that internally at Disney as well. They have said we had no cover. All of the pressure was coming from one side. So that was kind of interesting to me that these guys said, look, if the right started showing up at shareholders meetings, if they started voting what's called their proxies, which is, what the BlackRocks, what they use as your investment manager to show up and vote for, various proposals at these shareholder meetings. They said, you need to show up. You need to start demanding things. You guys need to start. It would be so much more effective than this boycott that we tend to go to. They're way beyond boycotts.
Yeah, way beyond. Yeah. That is really interesting. So the story that Bob Chapek, is that his name? Bob Chapek?
Chapek.
Yeah, the head of Disney, who has also got rumored to be kind of conservative, and certainly said openly that he wanted to take the company out of politics, that he didn't want to be a divisive force. So the story that he sits down and, a couple of angry LGBTQ people in the company bully him and he collapses, that's a false story. That is not the truth. That's not what happened.
Well, it is certainly part of it, and I don't want to discount that influence, but the other part of it is those employees start making noise to the press, and these large shareholder groups start going, well, we don't want this negative press. And if you remember, or maybe you don't, if your audience doesn't remember, during that shareholders meeting, that was when Bob Chapek shifted gears. They went to a shareholders meeting where there were noisy leftists saying, we're very concerned about you angering your activist employees and creating this bad press by not opposing the Florida bill. So for a while there, all the noise shareholder-wise was only coming from the left. Now, I'd be curious to know if they could go back. They might not do things differently because I don't think they anticipated this level. I don't think they ever saw the number of people going, that's enough, Disney. This is enough of these corporates, sponsorships coming in and saying, here's how we're going to transform America. I think it's kind of come as a shock to people.
Because they're so wrapped up by the press surrounds them, they cannot see outside that. Would it help if people who have their pension fund at BlackRock, or they have, whatever investment they have at BlackRock. Would it help if they went to BlackRock themselves and said, hey, we don't want you doing this. This is my money. You're using my money, my investment. Or is each person too small to do that himself and would need some kind of coalition?
Well, the coalition, I think, is important, but I loved what one of the finance guys I talked to, because then he started to speak my language of literature, and he said, I am tired of the Denethor thinking on the right. And
remind people who Denethor is. Yeah.
So Denethor in Lord of the Rings is the cowardly steward of Gondor who assumes that the cause is lost and decides to commit suicide rather than fight. And so this finance advisor, Jerry Boyer, said to me, I am tired of this Denethor thinking on the right. And it's very much, he said, like the Old Testament Israelites who say, we're grasshoppers in our own sight compared to I might have been the Philistines. But so, he said, we don't fight. So we just assume that we're going to lose. And we don't make those calls and we don't offer that pushback. And so, he was very much like, yes, it is important to do that. It's important to get organized. But he also said, what's been interesting is that the red states are starting to wake up to this danger. So you're starting to see people like Ron DeSantis. I think West Virginia has also done this. They are demanding answers of BlackRock, and they are saying we are going to pull our state pension funds out of your company if you don't stop using that money to do this woke corporatism.
So speaking of that, speaking of the red states striking back, you have Ron DeSantis and basically the Florida legislature saying they're going to strip Disney of its special, I don't even know what to call it. It's this kind of Vatican-like state that Disney has in the middle of Florida, where they have their own government essentially, and it's going to cost them a fortune if it's taken away from them. And people on the right, and I respect this, I respect their concerns certainly, people on the right are saying, well, that's going too far, because now what you're doing is you're punishing Disney for constitutionally protected speech. Disney has the right to oppose this law if they don't like it. How do you feel about that? Having watched this unfold, do you feel DeSantis has gone too far, or do you feel he's fighting, he's just fighting the way the fight has to be fought?
Well, for me, I feel that they're correcting something that never should have happened in the first place. I don't like these special carve-outs. I don't like a Disney Vatican City. I don't think that should have been a thing where they say, you don't tax us, we will do the taxing, we will run the emergency services, we will decide what we build there. I don't understand why they don't have to answer to the local governing authorities like everyone else. That just seems like a bad deal. So in a way, I go, this is a correction of what never should have been. I also think that there's something a little bit naive about arguing, hey, this is just Disney's free speech. Because there's also, as I said, coercion from very large actors. Actors that, when you really get deep in the weeds, are connected to China, that have some really big investments in China, who are moving these pieces on the board. And so, I heard Ben Shapiro say, and I kind of stand with him, that, look, if you are going to become nakedly partisan and a boldly political actor, well, now you're on the political field, and there's going to be some consequences to that. So I'm kind of in the camp of that is fair game.
Yep. Yeah, I kind of agree with that myself. I'm running out of time, but I would like to know what you think. What direction do you think this is going? Is this too complicated for the ordinary person to fight back? Is this the kind of thing that we're just going to have to sort of read in the papers what happens, or do you really think that activism will turn the tide?
No, I don't think it, and I'll tell you why. Because I am that average mom, suburban mom at home who doesn't know anything about this sort of. I mean, when I started reading about it, my head hurt a little bit. Yeah. And I'm like, explain these terms to me. And once they did, I started to see that there's been a tipping point in coverage. So I'm seeing a tipping point in press coverage, but I'm also seeing a tipping point in some of these Republican leaders like DeSantis and a few others who are starting to talk about it. And as I'm talking to people, you're just hearing suddenly, and it's weird how these things sort of reach a viral moment. So I'm suddenly hearing everyone talking about ESG, stakeholder capitalism. Guys like Elon Musk are helping that. So, I don't think that this is too big for us. I think, look, the left can do it. We're smart as they are. Why can't we do it?
That is a great point. Megan Basham, you really are doing a terrific job. I'm not flattering you. You're doing excellent work. And I hope people are taking a look and getting the Reader's Pass and looking at it. This article on ESG, how 3 investment firms are turning companies like Disney woke and what you can do to fight back. Megan, we will see you again next month. Thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Always good to see you. Thanks. If you love the content here, and you know you do, like and subscribe to the Andrew Klavan Podcast.